Joseph Andrews by Henry Fielding, dramatised in 4 episodes by John Scotney, with John Franklin Robbins, Cornelius Garrett and John Rye.
The third part is a very learned part, in which Mr. Adams meets a wise judge and a virtuous clergyman. So, it is objected against us that we dare to call our present work a history. Fiddlesticks, I say. I will affirm it more worthy of that word history than any of those romances entitled, say, A History of England or The History of France. History, history. Is not Don Quixote more worthy of that appellation history than of these histories confined to a single nation or a particular time? For Don Quixote's adventures are a history of the world in general, and the book's characters are of all time. So, too, our Lady Booby or Mr. Towwows are taken from life. They are not only alive, but have been these 4,000 years.
For truly you would do our author but little honour to aver that Mrs. Slipslop, now travelling westward in the coach with Joseph, is intended to ridicule some one pitiful wretch of his acquaintance. Rather 'tis our intention to hold the mirror up to thousands, privily, in their closets.
Good Parson Adams may now be comforting poor Fanny, having saved her from rape. Yet no doubt in the revolution of the ages he has stood behind the bar of an inn,
and may one day sit upon a throne. But we will detain you no further. Let us rather continue this our most true History and Adventures of Mr.
Joseph Andrews
and his friend, the Reverend Mr. Abraham Adams,
by your servant Henry Fielding, gentleman, and resume at that very point when Parson Adams and Fanny have discovered each other.
Fanny Goodwill. What can have brought you here? Tell me, child.
Oh, I merely chanced to be travelling to London, Mr. Adams.
Fie, fie. Oh, would that Joseph were here. It requires Joseph.
Joseph? Oh, would that be Mr. Joseph Andrews? Perchance, Mr. Adams? Pray, oh, tell me, is he well?
I left him, child, this afternoon, in the stagecoach on his way towards our parish, whether he is going to see you. He told me so himself.
Oh, to see me, sir? La, sure, you jeer me. What should he be going to see me for? What is Joseph to me? I never had anything to say to him, but as one fellow servant might to another. Oh!
In fact, the poor girl had heard of Joseph's misfortunes from one of the coach passengers, while she was milking a cow.
Oh, my Joseph! He is hurt!
Abandoning the beast, she took her little bundle in her hand, all the money she was worth in her purse, and set forward at once.
Oh, Mr. Adams, I am sure I never had anything to do with Joseph, save as one servant to another.
Oh, Fanny, for shame. You either do not tell me the truth or you are false to a very worthy man. But what of this wicked fellow? I fear I have smitten him fatally. Do you not think?
Your Honour? Oh, the man that attacked me.
Yes, I fear he is dead, Fanny.
Mr. Adams' fears were frivolous, however. Though stunned, the would-be rapist had long since recovered his senses, but had elected to play the dead man in the hope that Adams and Fanny would go to get help, so leaving the way clear for his resurrection and escape.
He was listening attentively to Mr. Adams' discourse when it was interrupted in a most startling manner.
Ha! Caught you, have we, ye varmints? Doesn't ye move? Listen, we're about to gash ye. Move, and this'll pepper ye.
Aye, that we will, aye, we will. We'll pepper ye.
Hold your peace, you ninny hammer. So, what do we be having here on Squire's land at this time of night? Explain yourselves if you can.
Haste to, sir, haste to. You are well arrived. Hoc erat.
I tell ye, fella, 'twill do thee not a jot of good spouting French. Squire hates the Frenches e'en more than he hates you poachers. Where have you hidden the nets, then?
Aye, he hates poachers. Got a rare hatred from them, Squire has, especially French poachers. Not as we have.
No, hold your blabber, Willie Nizzy. Go look for the nets, you old fool.
Poachers, sir? By my faith, I assure you, sir, we are not. No, we are no poachers. Rather, we are...
No, poachers. Indeed, they're not. There were some poachers, these villains.
Oh, may Hercule! I rejoice to see you're alive.
No, villain, I am not dead, though you and your wicked whore might well think me so after the barbarous cruelties you have exercised on me. You have saved me, sirs.
Who the devil are you, then? What was you doing lying there?
You reckon he's French too, Master Rog?
Gentlemen, you are luckily come to the assistance of a poor traveller who would otherwise have been murdered by this vile man and evil woman who led me hither from the high road, then fell on me and robbed me. How they used me you may well see for your own selves.
Oh, merciful heavens!
Fine, gentlemen, I protest. Oh, the poor girl has fainted.
Shamming for sure. An old device, I assure
I
you.
demand justice. I
Hold, villain! Squire's justice in these parts.
Yeah.
You'll come with us now to the hall. You can give your answer to the squire there. Now, sir, robbed were you say?
Indeed I was. No doubt, if you search these rogues, my money is still concealed about them.
Aye.
Try the woman first while she's still dead to the world.
You do that, Jem.
Aye, I will. Here, there's an embroidered purse with some money in it.
'Tis mine indeed. I swear I know it as well as my hand.
Here, see? There be something pricked out on this here purse.
What would that be?
F-A-N-E Goodwill. Fanny Goodwill.
Truly, so it has. I had forgotten. Here, let me have it. Thank you. Yes, I could swear to it. Oh, gentlemen, this purse matters more to me than the money. The very little money within it.
How so, sir?
Why, 'tis an heirloom. Fanny Goodwill. Our family motto. Welsh, as you of course well apprehend.
Poor Fanny was returned to her senses by the gamekeeper pouring a hatful of ditch water over her head. Which, taken with her dishevelled appearance and bloody nose, did much to disguise the beauty of her features. And so they set off toward the justice's residence.
This gentleman, having spent the day in a fox chase, had not finished his dinner.
But being at the height of his mirth and his cups, he determined to examine the prisoners before his company.
So, gentlemen, we've had good sport this day. And here's more sport to round the evening. Bring the prisoners in.
Come on, this way. Get in there.
Here, sir.
Well, do you see? See what a pair of damnable villains? A parson, eh? Did you ever see such... Why, he has the most evil look about him I ever did see. Now, you two, you may both be well assured you'll be made examples of at the next assizes. Devil take me if you're not. Here now, where's my clerk? Ah, there you are, sir. Make out the mittimus this instant and we'll finish the port.
Sir, I beg you would at least hear me before you sign anything.
Why,
which would
fellow,
incriminate
I must tell you, you're a very impertinent fellow to waste so much of my time. Make the mittimus. No, wait. I forgot. First, I must ask what evidence there is. Is that right, Clark?
The clerk acquainted the justice that among other suspicious things found in Adams' pocket was an Aeschylus written out in Mr. Adams' own hand, which, as the clerk had no Greek, he apprehended to be written in cipher.
Say you so? A cipher, eh? Oh, this fellow may be more than a common robber. £1 to a penny, 'tis a Jacobite agent!
All seemed lost, would have been lost, had not a benevolent providence decreed that there was one in the squire's party who, having stared steadfastly at Mr. Adams for some time, now asked him...
Sir, may I inquire... Do you not know my late cousin's wife, Lady Booby?
Why, Squire Booby, are you here? Heaven be praised.
Will you not inform his worship I am innocent, Your Honor?
I can indeed say that I'm very much surprised to see you in this situation. Mr. Adams, is it not?
Silence! What's this, booby? You know this fellow, that it?
Sir, I assure you, Mr. Adams is a clergyman, as indeed he appears, and a gentleman of very good character. I wish you would inquire a little farther into this affair, for I am convinced of his innocence.
What a gentleman, eh?
Sir, on oath I will avow that
nay, sir, 'tis enough, Squire Booby says you're a gentleman. Now, here you, clerk. Give the gentleman a glass of something to wet his whistle. Why, damme, I know how to behave myself to a gentleman, I hope, as well as another. I'll swear no one can say I've committed a gentleman, not once. Not since I've been in the commission. That they cannot. My oath, they cannot.
Mr. Adams explained what had occurred and how Fanny had so nearly been ravished by the perjurer.
The rogue, the damned rascal. Devil take the road. Where in hell is he? Bring the rascal here. Where is he?
But he, like a good general, knew when to retreat as well as when to attack, and had neglected to attend the issue, holding that Fanny's purse, several silver spoons, and a silver-gilt wine cooler which he had filched from the justice's table were more than honourable spoils from an engagement which had earlier seemed likely to prove absolute defeat.
But the gamekeeper did not escape so lightly.
Hodge, where are you, you poxy knave? Stand here, Your Honour. I've a mind to commit you for this folly, Hodge. Sure, any man of sense would have seen this gentleman to be a gentleman, you fopdoodle. Now, Mr. Adams, I'd be mightily obliged if you'd accept my apologies on Miss Servant's behalf and sit down with me to some cold victuals and a pint of wine.
Now, nothing would please the justice's humour but that Adams and Fanny should remain in his house as his guests that night. And in the morning, the justice's hospitality extended to his insisting that his own chaise should carry his guests as far as to Salisbury. This offer Mr. Adams accepted with good grace.
I thank you most kindly for your generous offer, sir. Not for myself, for I am confident I could outwalk your carriage, and do indeed prefer the pedestrian to the vehicular expedition, but on my young companion's behalf.
In the chaise, Mr. Adams settled himself to his Aeschylus and his tobacco pipe, and Fanny fixed her thoughts on our hero Joseph, and so the day passed uneventfully. Now, the ancient authors, when they found all thus uneventful for their heroes, were wont to call upon Poseidon to brew a storm at sea, or Jove to hurl a thunderbolt. We moderns do not attribute adversity of weather to such deities, yet we may sometimes admit a thunderclap into our tale. And indeed, that October is remembered to this present day as having been notoriously tempestuous.
Fanny and Mr. Adams were but 5 miles from Salisbury when a violent storm of rain obliged the postilion to bring them to the shelter of an inn, or rather alehouse.
Open up, will you? Open up! Is anyone there? Hello! Hello!
I'm coming! I'm coming! My, you'll be wet. You'll become you.
Madam.
This way. I haven't much ready, but I've a good fire and I'll bring you some toast and ale. Here, let me have them wet things. There.
No sooner were they settled by the fireside than Fanny's attention was drawn by a voice from an inner room, singing.
Fanny, I have been ruminating on this passage in Aeschylus' Why, child, bless us, you look extremely pale. Are you ailing?
Pale, Mr. Adams? Oh, 'tis nothing. Mr. Adams, that voice.
What voice, child? I heard no... Oh, yes.
The singing, Mr. Adams. Is it not... Oh, Jesus! Oh!
Oh, merciful heaven, the child has fainted again. Help! Help! Is anyone there? Help! Help!
What is it? What's amiss?
Ah, sir.
Hey, what is it, man?
Why, it's Mr. Adams.
Joseph!
Now, what the devil? Oh, Mr. Adams.
Mrs. Slipslop.
Joseph?
Fanny!
Who?
Oh, where am I? Are you indeed Joseph Andrews?
Art thou my Fanny?
Oh, Joseph!
Oh, let me draw you to my heart. Oh, Fanny.
Oh, Joseph!
Oh, Fanny.
If prudes are offended by the lusciousness of this coming together of Joseph and Fanny, let them consider instead Parson Adams, snapping his fingers and dancing about the room in a rapture of joy.
Gloriat, gloriat, laus Deo omnipotente, ben trovato me Hercule, me Hercule.
But, alas, as soon as the first tumults of rapture were over, he cast his eyes toward the fire, and there espied...
My Aeschylus!
For in his agitation at Fanny's fainting, he had thoughtlessly flung the book aside, and mischance had brought it into the fire. And now...
Oh, I trust the voluble is not too greatly damaged, Mr. Adams.
I fear so, Mrs. Slipslop. Yes, see, nothing remains but the sheepskin covers.
Marry, Mr. Adams, what a dreadful travesty.
Why, surely, Mrs. Slipslop, you know Fanny Goodwill. Surely. She was several years in Lady Booby's service. Fanny. Fanny? Fanny.
Oh, Mr. Adams, I don't know what came over me. I am covered in confusion. Oh, Mrs. Slipslop, ma'am, I'm very pleased to see you again, ma'am.
No, I do not recall the creature.
Oh, surely, Madam Slipslop, she is one of your old acquaintance. But no doubt you do not recognize her because she has grown into such a fine young woman, has she not, since she left Lady Booby's service?
She has grown into a brazen hussy, that's for certain.
No.
Oh, but never mind her. Mr. Adams, you are no doubt surprised to find us in this low alehouse.
No.
You must know that when we arrived at the inn to dine, I found Lady Booby's chaise waiting for me, for my lady is even now journeying into the country, and I am expected to make the utmost haste.
No.
So I abandoned the public stagecoach, and in commiseration for Joseph's injuries, brought him with me.
No.
And then the excessive virulence of the storm drove us into this house where you find us.
No, Mrs. Slipslop, no, you are wrong.
Upon my oath, Mr. Adams, that was my only reason for stopping here.
No, I mean you are wrong about Fanny. I believe there is not a chaster damsel in the universe. I heartily wish that all her betters were as good.
Mr. Adams, you stagger me. I am mightily surprised at finding you in her company. Are you not ashamed?
I assure you, madam, I am very far from such.
Indeed, sir. But then want of shame was never the characteristic of clergymen.
And with that, she swept from the room, giving Fanny as she left a look much like that Cleopatra gives Octavia in the play.
For to say truth, she was most disagreeably disappointed by the presence of Fanny, she herself having conceived hopes of a something with Joseph, which, well, can be accomplished as easily in an alehouse as a palace.
Indeed, in all probability, the parson had rescued more than Fanny from a rape. Mr. Adams, of course, understood no more of this than did the cat which sat on the table. But one thing troubled him.
I am mightily surprised, Fanny, at the weakness of Mrs. Slipslop's memory. I cannot comprehend how she could forget you, Fanny.
Say you so.
Sir?
With him at the fire was a weather-beaten Irish peddler who had come into the room when Adams cried for help and had remained to smoke his pipe and listen to the discourse.
You'll excuse me, Your Honour, for intruding, but I'm thinking it's little you'll be known of the way the great high people do always ignore those they think beneath them, holding it improper to acknowledge them.
I conceive your drift, sir, but this is no high lady.
Mrs. Slipslop is but an upper servant in the household of Lady Booby.
And sure, sir, isn't the greatest of the low many a time greater than the lowest of the high people?
How so, sir?
Why, consider how at the crack of dawn in any great house there arises one of those young boys that no great family, like no great ship, is without. And doesn't he brush the clothes and black the shoes of the footman? Which done, the footman performs the self-same labour for Mr. Second Hand, the squire's gentleman, who, a little later in the day, attends to the squire. The squire, later still, attends the levee of my lord, and afterward doesn't my lord go to the levee of the favourite, who, having received his homage, himself goes to attend on the sovereign. So, your honour, to your philosopher, wouldn't the question be whether you'd choose to be a great man at 6 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon? And each disdains equally the rank beneath.
It is a fine figure, sir. And yet I do not recall reading it anywhere. Tell me, from which of the ancient philosophers did you draw it, sir?
Sure, sir, I read it in no book soever. 'Tis drawn from me own experience. For since I first left me native townland to list with a good Irish regiment of foot, so, and as a pedlar, I've travelled far and had converse with many nations. And from this I have my knowledge of men, better than from any book.
Oh, fie, sir, you are wrong. Sir, knowledge of men may only be had from books, Plato and Seneca for that. Why, does not the learned
But
man...
we will not trouble you with Mr. Adams' argument. We did but insert this debate to introduce the pedlar to you, for he would later play a great part in our history, and to give Joseph and Fanny some time to themselves. Of their discussion, we give you but the conclusion.
Oh, beloved Joseph, you have won me. Yes, I will be yours forever.
I thank you. Oh, I thank you, dearest Fanny, on my bended knees. Oh, Fanny. And now, my beloved, let us go to the parson and beg him to join our hands together this very instant by special license.
And now to my 17th point, sir. It is that when a certain physiognomist remarked to Socrates from the... yes, Fanny?
Mr. Adams.
Yes, Joseph, what is it? Make haste. I was about to deliver to this gentleman a most telling exemplum. Was I not, sir? Sir, was I not?
Right. Oh, yes, sure indeed, sir. Yes, what time is it? It must be late, sure it must.
It's just that Fanny and I want you to marry us at once.
Yes, Mr. Adams, by special license.
What? Bless me, why? Joseph, what have you been... Joseph, you haven't, have you? Joseph, now answer me, have you?
Oh, no, Mr. Adams.
Fanny, you aren't... Are you? Are you, Fanny?
Oh, no, Mr. Adams, certainly not.
Oh, well, then I won't marry you.
Won't marry us?
No, not now. No, not by special license. I will by no means consent to anything contrary to the forms of the Church, and the Church has prescribed a form, namely the publication of banns. And for as many as are joined otherwise than God's word doth allow, are not joined together by God, neither is their matrimony lawful.
Not lawful? And is that so, Mr. Adams? Oh, Joseph, I would never consent to any such thing. And I do wonder, Joseph, that you should offer
You are
it.
right to say that, Fanny. And Joseph?
If you say so, Mr. Adams. But I do entreat you to put the banns in immediately that we return home.
And is that your wish too, Fanny?
Oh, yes, Mr. Adams.
Very well, then, and may God bless you both.
The happiness of the two lovers none of you that have not been in love can have the least conception of, though we had as many tongues as Homer desired to describe it with. But their perfect happiness and tranquility were interrupted by Mrs. Slipslop.
Come, Joseph, come. See, the storm is now ended, and the moon shines bright. We will not stay another minute in this shabby cockpit, but will continue at once to the King's Arms in Salisbury.
Yes, Mrs. Slipslop. Mrs. Slipslop, I beg you, is there perhaps room in the chaise for Mr. Adams?
Mr. Adams? Why, yes. I suppose we could accommodate him.
And my... Fanny, I trust she may come too.
What? What? How dare you?
Mary, come up. I'd rather be burnt before I'd suffer to get into the chaise with any such trollops. Joseph, come. Let us quit this bawdy house.
No.
What do you say?
No, Mrs. Slipslop. If you will not have Fanny to travel with you, then neither shall I.
Well, so, Mr. Adams?
Nor I, madam.
Very well then, sir. All of you. You may be assured I shall inform my lady what doings are carrying on. Mr. Adams, you are nothing but a common procurator.
And she flung herself from the room and towards the chaise. After that vehicle had carried off the enraged Slipslop, Adams, Joseph and Fanny assembled over the fire, where Adams smoked a pipe before all three retired to their beds. They descended late to breakfast next day, and the justice's man had already departed with his master's chaise. Joseph, however, finding himself surprisingly recovered, proposed that they continue on foot. And so they would have done at once, had not a small matter somewhat retarded them.
Mr. Adams?
Ah, madam. Thank you for your hospitality. You keep an excellent house. Now what is it? We must be soon away.
The reckoning, sir?
The
bill, sir.
Oh, yes. I had forgot. May I? Yes. 7 shillings only, most reasonable. Oh, heavens, did I take such a quantity of ale? Oh, I suppose I did. Yes, now, that's 7 shillings. Let me see. Now, 6pence and, a halfpenny. Ah.
Oh, never you fear, Mr. Adams. I have my purse here. Oh, now I remember it. It was stolen, wasn't it? Joseph?
Joseph?
Why, Fanny, Mr. Adams. I've no money. Well, do you not recall? Mine too was stolen.
Oh.
They stood silent for some minutes, staring at each other.
And so the pedlar espied them as he himself went to depart. Adams explained their dilemma, at which the pedlar took the parson aside. How much is it that you're owing, Your Honour?
Some 7 shillings in all.
Well, 'tis no great sum, considering the immense quantity of ale you... But wait. No, I have but 6 shillings and 6pence in my pocket. But here, you may have it with all my heart.
Oh, it will do, for I have 6pence myself. But no, it cannot be. Living at such a distance, I fear you should lose your money for want of our finding any conveniency of sending. You must not trust us.
Trust you, Your Honour? Why, that I will for sure, for I like well your fear they'll not pay me. Why, 'tis worth lending you the money for the novelty of it. And besides, won't I be in your part of Somerset myself in just a few days, and you may pay me back then, if you've a mind to.
And so our friends continued their journey in good cheer, and Joseph sang as they went.
Lovely dear, my vow shall ever true remain. Let me kiss off that falling tear. We only part to meet again.
The pedlar bore them company past Salisbury, but then, some miles short of the little town of Shaftesbury, he said...
Your way lies straight ahead, over that hill and through the little wood, do you see? I'll not venture that way myself, though I once knew the road well.
But why,
No, you must listen to me. I have my reasons. Straight ahead, and now I must leave you.
But my dear
No,
sir,
Mr. Adams, no farewells. We shall meet again within the week, if 'tis God's will. Oh, but you would greatly oblige me in one thing, if the chance arises.
Sir!
Within an hour or so's walking, you'll find yourself at a little village or hamlet, some 6 or so houses. It has no name, but you'll know it by the inn. The New Inn, 'tis named. Would you inquire for me, sir, about a Mr. Wilson, if he still lives in those parts, and if he still grieves his loss? And now, in truth, I must leave you. Godspeed, and keep you safe.
until at length...
Why, see here, Mr. Adams. That must be the hamlet the pedlar spoke of. And here, could this be the inn?
It could, Joseph. In truth, it could.
And that red-faced man with the apron, Mr. Adams. Do you think he might be the landlord? The plump man by the door?
Why, so he might, Fanny. He well might. I doubt it not.
Well, should we not inquire of him if that is the case, Mr. Adams? If it should be, and if he should be?
Why, so we should, Joseph. Yes, you have hit it indeed. Sir!
Your Honour.
Am I addressing the landlord of the New Inn?
That you are, sir.
Ah, then, I have been asked by a kind acquaintance to ask after Mr. Wilson. Does he live here still, and does he still...
Oh, he lives here indeed, sir. That large house at the end of the village, that's his, sir. But as to grieving, well, I know nothing of that. He always seems to me the happiest and most contented of men.
Does he so?
Sir?
Yes?
As you and your friends are travelling on foot, no doubt a glass of good beer would not be disagreeable to you. I flatter myself mine is some of the best in the county, and 'tis not dear.
Mr. Adams was not the man to refuse such an offer.
Why, thank you, landlord. We will take a glass.
And what with Mr. Adams' large thirst, the dust, and the tiredness of Joseph and Fanny, they were well settled into a second jug before it occurred to Joseph that they had not one penny piece between them.
What shall we do, Mr. Adams?
Do? Why, I have no idea. But no, wait. There may perchance be some hope. Landlord!
Sir, I trust the beer is to your liking?
Oh, that it is, sir. Now that it is. But pray, is there no clergyman in this parish?
Why, there is indeed, sir. There's Parson Trolliver.
And Mr. Trolliver, how is he circumstanced? Is he a wealthy man?
Wealthy? Why, yes, as saving your cloth, sir, as parsons go, he is pretty wealthy.
And as a man of God, he is no doubt a charitable man?
Oh, that he is, sir. Why, that word charity, 'tis never out of his mouth. I've heard him preach on that there charities many's the time I have.
Eureka! Joseph, Fanny, we need give ourselves no more trouble, for I have a brother in the parish who will defray the reckoning. I will but step to his house to fetch the money, and I will return to you instantly.
And with that, Mr. Adams set out immediately. Joseph and Fanny were much cheered, understanding Mr. Adams to mean he had a natural brother in the parish, not a brother clergyman.
Yet I am surprised, dearest Fanny, that this Mr. Trolliver is wealthy, for I've often heard Mr. Adams exclaim that there's not one of his families is worth sixpence. Yet tell me, landlord, whence comes the parson's wealth?
Marry, sir, from his hogs.
Hogs?
Yes, bless you, his hogs. He be the biggest breeder of fat pigs this 20 mile about.
And truly, though Mr. Trolliver was a parson on Sundays, on the other 6 days he might more properly be called a hog farmer.
Yeah, me please eat this off.
So much did the parson's mind run on his fat pigs that, aided by much ale, he had come to resemble one, for he was so large he could have acted the part of Sir John Falstaff without stuffing. And since Mr. Adams, now wrapped in his old greatcoat, himself looked little the part of a parson, it was small wonder that Mr. Trolliver should have mistaken his visitor, his own mind so running on hogs and their dealings.
Mr. Trolliver!
Hey!
Mr. Trolliver!
Who?
Are you Mr. Trolliver, sir?
I am that, sir, so I bet. And I know well what you be come for.
You do, sir?
I am welcome. Come you into sty. Come you, sir, in sty with me. Down back and leave him alone now. Say, all you will. And upwards of 20 score in the pit.
Sir, pray
Now, all right. I know thee well enough not to need to praise him to thee, eh?
know me, sir. I believe
Why,
you
of course I do, yes. Did you off the fair? Why, you not reform when I warrant you. Now back will I.
Sir, I pray you, I will
Yes,
only
yes,
be
I
here.
remember thy face very well. But I won't mention a word more till you've handled them. Here, give me thy hand.
Sir.
There, feel that.
Oh.
There's a fortune in puddings alone there. And I never sold thee such a flitch of bacon as is here in my sty now. Look out for that one now, you little dead. Look you out!
Help! Sir, I beg you hear me.
Nihil habeo comportis.
What's that you say? Port now, why, I'll...
Sir, I am a clergyman.
Yeah.
And am not come to buy hogs.
Eh? That's so, is it? I thought you couldn't handle him.
Oh.
A clergyman, eh? Well then, best come out. The ox story then. Reckon you best clean yourself up then. Pumps over here. Well, fancy you being a clergyman then. I could have sworn you's a hog dealer I knew at Blandford Fair. You ever go to Blandford Fair?
No, sir, no.
Oh, well, friend, I don't know how you took the door on the heat. However, as you are here, if you think proper to eat a morsel, I was fine a bit of fat bacon was walking in that very yard not 3 days ago.
Sir, your offer is most generous. Well, but I have a lad and a damsel awaiting me at the inn. My parishioners.
Oh.
We're travelling towards my cure. And at that house of hospitality, they directed me towards you as having the cure here.
Though I am but a curate, I believe I am as warm as the vicar himself. And perhaps the rector of the next parish too. I believe I could buy them both.
Sir, I rejoice thereat. Well, now, sir, my business is that we are by various accidents stripped of our money and are not able to pay our reckoning, a matter of some few pence. I therefore request you to assist me with the loan of half a guinea to cover this cost and those of the remainder of our journey.
Such was the astonishment that seized upon Mr. Trulliber at this speech, that for a while he rolled his eyes in silence, sometimes surveying Adams, sometimes casting him on the ground, then lifting him to heaven. Then he burst forth. Dost thou intend to rob me? I believe thou art no clergyman, but a common beggar.
I forgive you your suspicions, but supposing I were not a clergyman, I am nevertheless thy brother, and thou, as a Christian, art obliged to relieve my distress.
Just preach at me! Just pretend to instruct me in my duty! I would have thee know, my friend, I know what charity is, better than to give to a vagabond.
Oh, I am no...
Thou shalt not have a farthing! Be off with thee, this minute!
Sir, you do not know what charity is.
Nay?
Nor do I believe you to be a Christian.
Oh,
For the commands of the Scriptures are so explicit, the rewards and punishments so immense, that it is impossible a man should steadfastly believe without obeying them.
Oh,
and there is no duty more frequently enjoined, no command more explicit than charity. I repeat, you are no Christian!
I would not advise thee to say I am no Christian. I won't take it off you, for I believe I am as good a man as thyself.
And indeed, though he was rather too corpulent now for athletic exercise, he had in his youth been one of the best boxers and cudgel players in the county. But rather than present you with the unhappy spectacle of two ordained clergymen coming to buffets, we will rather draw a curtain over our scene. And remark that some time later Mr. Adams was hastening back to the inn with a cut over his left eye and his cassock somewhat awry. As was his custom when agitated, he was snapping his fingers and lamenting aloud in the Greek tongue. Now, Plato or Aristotle or somebody else has said that when the most exquisite cunning fails, chance often hits the mark, and that by means least expected. Imagine, if you will, the unlikely chance of Mr. Adams finding his thoughts, uttered in Greek, being answered in that same tongue, and that in a country lane in Wiltshire.
Leges alithe caeper et macronu.
The gentleman who answered Mr. Adams was a plain kind of man, simply but comfortably dressed in the country fashion. He was walking a little yelping puppy dog upon a string, and since his Greek was no match for Mr. Adams' fluency and scholarship, he at once relapsed into English.
Perhaps to your relief, and most assuredly to that of your author.
Pray, tell me, sir, what is distressing you?
Having acquainted this gentleman with the details of his interview with Mr. Trulliber, which to his great credit the gentleman heard with an almost straight face, Mr. Adams concluded,
Sir, I assure you that had I the greatest sum in the world, if I had £10 about me, I would bestow it
all to rescue any Christian in distress. Ah, but enough of this, sir. Do you know, perchance, where I can buy an Aeschylus? An unlucky misfortune lately happened to mine.
Why, sir, I believe I have one at home. You may have it if you wish.
Oh, nay, sir, this will not do. I will purchase it from you.
And what with, pray? But have you not told me you have no money? Oh, no, sir, you may have it and welcome.
Oh, sir, your generosity puts that of my fellow parson to shame. But I beg you, may I have the favor of your name?
My name is Wilson, sir. I live in this house at the end of the village.
Your name is Wilson? Why, you are the very man I seek. Now, sir, are you acquainted with an Irish peddler? I believe you are.
An Irish peddler? What's this? Oh, no, I know of none such.
No? Which is strange. Ah! He was formerly a soldier in a regiment of foot.
Again, sir, I know the man not. An Irish soldier?
Why, this is most strange indeed, for he knew of you and bade me ask whether you still lived here. And if you have overcome your grief at your loss.
What? My grief at my loss? How the you come near me now. For I tell you truly, sir, though I put it from my mind, no, I have not. Yet how should this fellow know of it? Oh, but come, my dear sir, let us to the inn to find your friends. If you'll suffer simple fare, you will dine with me, and then, if you wish, you will hear my story.
Mr. Wilson soon discharged the small debt at the inn and brought the company back with him to his house. After dinner, Mr. Adams, by public permission, filled his pipe.
And now, sir, if it be not too troublesome, your history, if you please.
Well, sir, I am come of good family. My education was at a public school. My father dying when I was 16, he left me master of myself. After that I stayed little at school, for I was ambitious to obtain the character of a fine gentleman. But, well, saving the young woman's presence, all I achieved after 2 years was a familiarity with the haws and orange wenches of Covent Garden. Some more ale, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, sir.
They, Mr. Adams, and the company of gamesters saw to the finishing of most of my fortune. But then, and I bless heaven for it, I met the dear creature who is now my wife. Her nobility of spirit drew me from these courses, and her little fortune, taken with the remnant of my great one, enabled us to purchase this place, whence we retired, from a world full of bustle, noise, hatred and envy, to this of ease, quiet and love. We are here now some 20 years. The squire of the parish takes me for a madman, and your friend, Mr. Trolliver, resents me as a Presbyterian, because I will not hunt with the one, nor talk of hogs with the other.
But your grief, sir. Fie, sir, surely it is not for the loss of your former fortune that you grieve. For are you not now blessed with a treasure above riches?
Oh, yes, sir. But no blessings are pure in this world. Within 3 years of coming here, I lost my eldest child. That, sir, is the loss I grieve.
We must submit to Providence, and consider death is common to all.
Had the baby died, indeed, I could have borne the loss with patience. But alas, sir, it was stolen away from my door by some wicked travelling people. Nor could I
But
ever
at
discover...
this point, the gentleman's account of his misfortune was interrupted by another tragedy, which, though small in itself, yet served to distract the company from the other. This was the entry of Mr. Wilson's 11-year-old daughter in tears, bearing in her arms the corse of the little puppy dog we earlier observed, and which had been wantonly shot by the squire of the parish.
Oh, my poor child. Come to my arms.
Mr. Adams grasped his crab stick, and pronouncing the word rascal with great emphasis, would have sallied out after the squire.
Had he not been forcibly withheld by Joseph. No, Mr. Adams, sir, no! Pray consider you're a stranger in these parts. 'Twould do no good, sir. The dog is dead.
No, my dear sir, no, your friend is right. The squire here is an evil man with an evil name. He is an absolute tyrant in these parts, and surrounded by many of his own sort. To pursue him would but bring greater mischief.
Mayhap, sir, mayhap. And yet I would I could meet with him for such an ill-natured act.
Lord, Lord, what wickedness is in this Christian world! Such an act! I profess 'tis almost equal to what I have read of the heathens. I would I could meet him. I say again, 'pon my word I do.
Mr. Adams little thought how shortly his wish was to be granted. That night our friends passed in the house of their kind host, and next morning took their leave early. They had travelled but a few miles along the road when they came to one of the beautifulest spots in the universe, a kind of natural amphitheatre, watered by a rivulet, surrounded by tall trees, and spread with a verdure no paint could imitate.
Oh, Joseph, they're so pretty. My beloved, let us rest a while here.
Why, so it is, dearest Fanny. May we not stop here some minutes, Mr. Adams, and enjoy the beauties of this delightful vista?
Mr. Adams assenting, they breakfasted there on some provisions the good nature of Mrs. Wilson had provided them with. Afterwards, Adams stretched himself on his back and was soon snoring like a donkey. Joseph then took Fanny by the hand and commenced a dalliance as innocent as it was charming.
Oh, dearest, dearest Fanny.
Oh, dearest, dearest Joseph.
Oh, Fanny.
Oh, Joseph. Oh, Joseph. Oh, Joseph? What's that sound?
Why, Fanny, unless I'm much mistaken, 'tis a pack of hounds, and in full cry, and bless me, they're coming this way.
At once, they saw a hare pop forth from the wood, so spent and weak from the chase that it fell down at Fanny's feet.
Oh, Joseph! Oh, Joseph, see the poor creature! Oh! Is it not quite barbarous to worry such a poor, innocent, defenceless thing out of its life and put it to such torture, and all for the sake of a diversion?
Why, Fanny, 'tis a most noble sport, and be assured the hare...
Joseph had no time to reply before the hounds came rushing through the woods, pursued by the huntsman and the master, who was none other than the evil squire who had shot the puppy dog the day previous. As for the hare, too weak to run further, it sought refuge where it could, which happened to be under the cassock of the sleeping Adams.
What is it?
What? Gone to ground, eh? After him, me beauties!
What? Bless me! Oh, sir, down, sir, down! Help, Joseph!
Mr. Adams, I'm coming! Down!
Squire, let me bring them off with you! Just the surest way to spoil them for the hare and make them full of vermin! Bring word! Wonder! Come on!
No, leave them, you devil! Don't spoil the sport! Halloo! Halloo! Why, this is the largest jack hare I ever saw! Halloo! Halloo!
At first, fortune seemed to incline the victory to the travellers, for the squire was content to leave the outcome to fate, and even ventured to wager 10 guineas on the parson. But then he espied the distraught Fanny, and other sport came to mind.
Why, what have we here? Well, my beauty, you're a find, aren't you?
Oh, unhand me, sir! I beg you to sit! Oh, Joseph! Mr. Adams!
Fanny! Yeah, Rogers, take this jacket. Hey, you, Simpwell, Oscar, see to those two.
And some half-dozen human curs coming to the aid of the dogs, Joseph and Mr. Adams were quickly overcome and secured with ropes. Once the squire was sure he was safe from their vengeance, he turned his attention again to Fanny.
Now, wench, will you yield willingly? I assure you 'tis not in your power to preserve your maidenhead 2 hours longer.
Oh, heaven, I pray, strike me dead, rather!
Oh, so that's the way, is it? So be it, then.
Oh, I shall run mad, Mr. Adams. Oh, that I could command my hands to tear my eyes out rather than see my dearest Fanny so...
No, Joseph, no. There you are wrong. It is the business of a Christian to summon reason to his aid, to teach him patience and submission.
No. No author can be so stony-hearted as to leave such a charming, innocent creature, such a brave young lover, or such a noble Christian gentleman in such distress any longer. You will recall that these events took place beside the public highway, and at that moment the deity who presides over chaste love sent a coach speeding along that highway, and no public coach, but one belonging to one who, though we have heard little from her of late, has been much in our thoughts.
Stop the coach! Stop the coach, I say!
Whoa!
Joseph! My Joseph! Oh, what's happening, my poor Joey?
Lady Booby!
Had her ladyship been alone, she could have done little to help our hero, but happily she never travelled without a full armed guard on the box and 2 armed outriders.
Shoot the wretches! Shoot them! Joey! Joey! What have they done to you? Kill the bastards! Kill them!
The ruffian's courage, which had been sufficient to face a maiden and 2 unarmed men, was not adequate to this challenge, leaving blood upon the ground. Once the fire had been concentrated about Joseph, the squire was able to escape to his horse. However, in his terror, he rode headlong into it, broke his neck, and so departed both this world and our history. The party returned in triumph to Booby Hall, her ladyship now wholly reconciled to Joseph, and, since love is blind, utterly unaware of the threat to her desires posed by Fanny, for she had not yet spoken to Mrs. Slipslop.
She entered the parish amidst the ringing of bells and the acclamations of the poor, who rejoiced to see their patroness returned after so long an absence.
During which time all her rents had been remitted to London, without a shilling being spent among them, which tended not a little to their utter impoverishment.
And dear Mr. Adams, to mark my return among my dear tenants and neighbours, and your own escape from such terrible trials, and that of my dear servant Joseph, oh, and the wench, whatever her name is, may we not have a service of Thanksgiving in the church tomorrow?
Adams consented, and all would have been happiness and joy had not Mr. Adams chosen the occasion to remember his promise to the young lovers.
And my dear, dear children, I take great joy on this happy occasion to publish the banns of marriage for the first time of asking between Joseph Andrews, bachelor of this parish, and Angela Bird, spinster of this parish. If any know any just cause or impediment, why What is it? What is this commotion?
It's Lady Booby, Mr. Adams. She's fainted. Fainted clean away.
In episode 3 of Joseph Andrews by Henry Fielding, dramatized in 4 episodes by John Scotney, Fielding was played by John Rye, Joseph by Cornelius Garrett, and Parson Adams by John Franklin Robbins. June Barry was Lady Booby, Jane Leonard, Fanny, Anne Jameson, Mrs. Slipslop, Ronald Herdman, the Justice, Geoffrey Bateman, John Booby, Sean Barrett, the Irish Peddler, Peter Woodthorpe, Mr. Trolliber, Paul Nicholson, Mr. Wilson, and John Abineri, the Evil Squire. Music was composed and directed by Vic Gammon. Joseph Andrews is directed in Bristol by Sean McLaughlin.